guys, my name's Sarah. Thanks for joining me today for episode 1 of my size inclusive sewing bee pattern roundup. Now I know there are some other sewing bee pattern roundups on the internet, but I find because they're more focused on accurately matching patterns rather than finding the best size range, that often patterns come up that are not so size inclusive, and then I always feel like a bit disappointed that I can't find the ones that I want. So I thought I would make a version. So with each episode, where possible, I am going to try and find some patterns which will work, which are in a decent size range. And this may mean that they're not always exact matches because the contestants might not be using patterns with a big size range, but I can hopefully find features and ideas, and we can work towards making something inspired by what we're seeing on the show each week. So episode 1, what were they doing? So in the pattern challenge, they made a tie front blouse. These obviously, it's that sort of Ganni style blouse, really fashionable through last year as well. And the version that they were set to make was, it had, I think, 3 ties on the front, had a peplum, it had full length balloon puff type sleeves with an elasticated wrist, and a round neck. So I've come up with 3 options, and I'm going to do them in from the best size range to the smaller size range, although all of them are pretty good. So the one with the best size range is the Muna and Broad Nuri blouse, which I'll pop a picture of here. This is a really good fit. It's got a poofy sleeve with elastic, although it's shorter, it's not the full length sleeve. It has a dual neck. There's also the option of a Peter Pan collar. The blouse can also be made with either ties or buttons. It has the little peplum. I think this one is actually a really good match. Now the size range for this, it goes up to a bust of 66 inches, a waist of 60 inches, and a hip of 71.5 inches. But Muna and Broad also say that if you are outside of their size range, they will draft up for you. So really, the size range is infinite. So that is a number 1 choice. The next best one in terms of size range is the Tilly and the Buttons Nell. Now this one I would say looks slightly less like the version that they used on the show. And a big reason for this is because it has a V neckline. But there are lots of other things that make this a good choice. So it has the option, excuse me, of having the peplum, but you can also make it as a straight blouse or as a dress. It's the same for the Nuri as well. That can be made as a dress also. It has 4 different sleeve options. So for straight sleeve, you can make a little short sleeve or a bracelet length sleeve. There is a flutter sleeve and there is a lined puff sleeve. So lots of fun options for the sleeves. Again, it has options for a tie or a button front, but the big difference is that V-neck line. And this one comes in sizes of a bust, so up to a bust of 60 inches, a waist of 53 inches, and hips of 61 inches. And then the last one to mention is the Fabric Godmother Fleur. Now, this one, again, has a lot of similar attributes. It has a puff sleeve, but it's a shorter puff sleeve. It's more like elbow length, and it's bound rather than elasticated. It has the peplum option, which is great. It has the ties. It also has a secret placket to preserve your modesty, which is great. I have made this as a dress, and I would say if you're a busty gal, just play around with the positioning of the bows, like you would with buttons, really. And you can, I actually stitched down part of the placket because I still found it a bit gapey, probably because I didn't quite have the bows in the right place. But yes, this one's a nice one as well. It comes in 2 different cup size options. There's a B cup and a D cup. And this goes up to 57.25 inches bust, 47.25 inch waist, and 56.75 inch hip. There is absolutely loads of ease in the waist and the hips for this, so it could actually go up to a bigger size quite easily, but that's the sizes they give on the size chart. So that's 3, I think, decent options for the pattern challenge, which is great, and a pretty good size range in all of those, so that's fab. Now, the transformation challenge we're not going to do. They transform circle skirts. I was thinking I could find a circle skirt pattern, but then they would turn them into other things, so it gets all a bit silly. So we forget about that and we move on to the made to measure challenge. And this time it was about dresses with pleats. Now I'm going to split this into two parts. So one part is patterns that are inspired by things that the contestants made, and then the second part is going to be other patterns that incorporate the theme for the week, that you could do if you had been on the sewing bee. Or if you're playing along at home, some other options that fit the theme. So excuse me with my notes here because otherwise I'll get this all wrong. So first up, we have Yasmin's tartan mini dress, which I thought was really, really cute. And pretty much straight away, I thought I recognised the pattern. It's not an exact match, so there is a possibility that it is a different pattern altogether, or that it is this pattern, but she's just changed a couple of elements. And the pattern I think it is made from is the Maiden Mary Riviera dress. But I think the main changes are that the skirt side panels, rather than being gathered, which they are in the original pattern, have been changed for pleated panels, which wouldn't be too difficult to do. And the straps have been turned into like tie-up bow straps, which again, not too difficult to do. As I said, I'm not 100% sure it's this dress, but I was pretty sure when I saw it. It's got very similar style lines. You've got like a panel across the bust. You have panels down. There's like a centre front panel which goes straight down, and then you have the side panels at the waist, and then you have these gathered skirt panels. Excuse me. So I think if this isn't the one, it's really close, so you could use it to make something very similar. The sizing for this, it goes up to a bust of 62.25, a waist of 55.5, and hips of 67. I have this pattern in my stash, which is why I recognised it, and I'm absolutely desperate to make it at some point. So yeah, very, very cute little pattern there. So I think that's that one. Then we have Gainer's dress, which was quite a simple silhouette. So it was a sleeved dress with a box pleat in the centre of the skirt. Now, again, I don't think I've necessarily found the exact one. There were a few that were sort of similar, and it's a fairly straightforward silhouette. So the one that I've come up with that has a decent size range is the Style Arc Patricia Rose. You would just have to shorten the sleeves and slightly lower the waist. But the silhouette's the same, the sort of V-neck, the pleat in the centre of the skirt. And Style Arc are a really good pattern, and their block for bigger sizes is really good and consistent, which is great. We then had the pattern that Stuart, Jess and Kaz all used the same one of. And I had a bit of a look. I think it is this Vogue pattern, which is not size inclusive because big four, yada, yada, yada. I think it was this, which is advertised as a top, but you could easily make it into a skirt. It has very similar style lines, especially for Jess and Kaz's version with that like high neck and the sort of sleeveless thing. And I think you could extend it really easily. So I couldn't find anything exactly the same as this, but I did find another pattern, which I actually think is nicer, that uses the same method of having like closed pleats on the bodice, which then open up to give shape to the skirt. And it's the Fibre Mood, I don't know if it's Pippa or Piper dress. I'll put a picture here and the link will be down below. And so this one obviously looks nothing like it, but it does use that same technique. And I think this dress is actually kind of cuter, if I'm honest. I don't actually think it would be that difficult to create this on many different types of patterns, because I presume you just like sort of slice it, spread it, and then it all folds in on itself. Do you know what I mean? So I imagine you could actually use this effect on other patterns that you might already have and like, but you could save yourself that by just making this dress. So this, as I said, it's not exactly the same, but it uses a similar approach. And this goes up to a bust of 57.5, a waist of 52.6, which just seems very precise, and then hip of 57. Yeah, so that's that. We then had Orla's monochrome dress, which was the dress with the amazing sort of like folded up detail on the front and the cool sleeves. And I think a couple of the other bees use these sort of more sculptural elements to add things. Now, I found one pattern that has that sort of folded sleeve effect. But it's for a t-shirt, so it's for a stretch fabric. But I don't see any reason why you couldn't use that same method on a woven non-stretch fabric. You just would have to make sure that you'd allowed enough extra space into the pattern piece so that, because it obviously won't stretch. But this is the Forget Me Not Patterns Iris Tee. I'll put a picture here, which has these cool sort of folded over sleeves, which I thought were really cute. And this goes up to a bust of 58.5, a waist of 49.5, and a hip of 60.5. So that could really work if you just want a bit of an interesting sleeve. There also is a book that has been on my radar for ages as a sort of, one day I might get around to having the time to play around with this, but it is called Pattern Magic. It's by Tomoko Nakamichi. Sorry if I did not say that correctly. And yeah, it's about fabric manipulation. It's got this really cool blouse on the front that has like these little cubes coming out the front of it. And there are other books on fabric manipulation where they sort of show you how you can almost like sculpt things out of fabric. So that will be another option. And also with those approaches, it's not really about, it obviously is about measurements, but it's not really about size. You can apply them to garments of any size. So yes, very size inclusive, and definitely a way to open horizons and give some interesting elements to your clothes or other things that you're making. So that book is on my wish list. And I found it very inspiring watching the bees making their pleated garments this week. I thought it was a really strong first week, actually. I compare it to the one, I can't remember if it was last series or the series before, where they had to make in the first week, the pattern challenge was the denim skirt, but it was all like top stitched. I don't think anyone finished it. And I remember finding it all a bit like, oh, because it's like, you know, why give them a challenge that literally no one can finish? Whereas this time I felt like it was sort of had been weighted a bit more accurately so that we actually got to see some really nice garments at the end of it rather than giving people impossible time limits. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. Anyway, I had a look through a few other patterns that incorporate pleats that have a decent size range, just in case you fancy making something with pleats, but maybe none of those styles are your thing. So one that again I've admired for a really long time is the Fiber Mood Nina dress. Now I will say this is potentially not big boob friendly because it has a really low back. I think you could probably work out how to raise the back. It just, in its current form, is not wearable with the bra. So yes, just worth paying attention. But on the front, it has these really beautiful, so it's got like a V-neck, and along the panels here, you'll be able to see there are really beautiful pleats all the way down. Now, obviously, if you're on the sewing bee, I just don't think you'd have time necessarily to do this many pleats. But I'm assuming none of us are on the sewing bee, so that's fine. So you can just sew it in your own time. But I think this is a really beautiful pattern. It is one of those that whenever it pops up, I think, oh, should I buy it? And then I don't know, it would take quite a lot of adjustment to be wearable for me in my life. So it always pushes back down the line. But I think it's so pretty. And again, that sort of having panels that are pleated, I think is something you could add into lots of different patterns. You could just take the pattern piece and extend it and then turn, do you know what I mean? Mark on where the pleats need to be. I still think that'll be cute. So that's one idea. That goes up to a bust of 57.5, waist of 52.6, and hip of 57 again. Sorry, it says weirdly, the Fiber Mood with their weirdly precise measurements. We then have a couple of sew over it patterns that incorporate pleats. One is the Jemima, which I will put a picture of here. I am one of the models for these, so just so you're not like, what? Now this comes as a dress and a jumpsuit. I have this, I've been planning to make it for ages. I really wanted to make the jumpsuit version. And then I just always leave it too late in the season because the fabric I have is really summery. But I think I actually might just make the dress version of this soon because I really enjoyed wearing the one for the photo shoot. Obviously, the shaping is given to both the dress and the jumpsuit from big pleats, which sort of move towards the centre of the dress. And they also have them in the back of the dress. So it has a really nice sort of shaping element. The pleats are quite large as well, so it's not too much crazy work to do. Whereas the Nina is obviously like 100 million pleats. We also have the Sew Over It Hetty dress. This is a bit more similar to the dress that Gainer made. So it has that single pleat on the front. This, I think, is an inverted box pleat. I think that's what it's called. And And I also have this pattern, haven't made it yet. I had a chat with the ladies from Sew Over It at the Stitch Festival about this dress because I wasn't sure whether it would just be very tenty on a busty lady. But they were telling me that there's the option. So basically you have this bit at the front that's sewn down and then the pleat is sort of released, but you can sew down as far as you need to until it's under your bust so that the pleat is released from your waist rather than, or your under bust, as opposed to tenting out from the boob. So that's another one with a really nice pleat detail. And I think especially if you did it in like a swishy viscosy fabric, you'd have lots of fun volume. We then have another favourite of mine, the By Hand London Tamsin dress. This makes the most of decorative pleats, so they don't add any volume anywhere in the dress. They're just there to look cute. So this is Peak Cottagecore dress. It's got a nice square neckline with a visible facing. So you fold the facing over the opposite way to normal, which creates like a nice neckline detail, sort of like this actually, but that's not what this is. And it has pleating on the sleeves and the skirt, and it just adds to the nice cottagecore vibes. I love this pattern. I just think it's really pretty. The pleats are nice, especially if you pick like a gingham fabric or something. It's very, very easy to get the pleats as you want them. So that's another really nice option for pleats. We then have the So Different Aria pleat dress, which I've spoken about before. This again used pleats for shaping. So especially around the waist and the back, the pleats sort of come in and then they release into the skirt and release into the bodice. So you get lots of movement in the garment generally, but you get that like nice fitted waist. So that's another really great one. And the last one that sort of pops into my head, which is a bit left field, is the Charm Patterns Monroe dress. Now I've made my version of it here. It was released at the start of this year and it's inspired by a dress that Marilyn Monroe wears in one of her films. I can't remember which one. And I was really pleasantly surprised with this dress. It was very outside my comfort zone. It sort of has quite a fitted silhouette, which made me nervous. And obviously like the neckline and things are things that I've not really worn before. So it was really a steep learning curve for making that one. But I actually love that dress and I feel so good in it. Yeah, I think it gives a great shape. And anyway, it has, so down, there's like a flat center panel. It's a bit like the construction of the Riviera dress where you have like a straight panel that goes down and then gathered panels on the side. It's just the shaping of them is very different. But also the panel that goes down the front is initially stitched down and then it releases. So there's a pleat, which means at the bottom of the dress, you have this sort of fitted bit around your tummy and hips. Although I would say it's a skimmer rather than a clinger. And then that pleat then releases at the front. So you get a bit more movement. I just think it looked really nice. Very sort of a vintage, definitely. But for someone who doesn't really wear very fitted clothing in that area, I felt really good. I just felt like it skimmed in the right places and then it sort of kicked out in the right places. And a big part of that is coming down to the pleat. So it creates this nice, it draws your eye down. So I think it elongates, but then the release just gives you that sort of like a Coke bottle shape. So yeah, I thought I'd add that in because it's a different kind of pleat, but a pleat nonetheless. And it adds something a little bit different into the collection. So hopefully you found that useful. I'm looking forward to seeing it next week. I think they're doing a lot of athleisure next week. So we will see what they end up making and I will try and find some nice size inclusive patterns to go along with that. Obviously there are certain weeks, like if they do kids week where there's less of a need, but I'll have a bit of a look anyway. I'll see what they do and we'll work it out. I'm also going to try when they do menswear to have a look for patterns because I know from trying to sew for my husband that there is such little choice of size inclusive patterns for men. So yeah, so I'm going to do my best. Guys. But that was the first week. I hope you enjoyed it. Are there any pleat dress sewing patterns that I have missed? Please let me know down below, or if you found anything size inclusive. What is size inclusive? But do you know what I mean? So if you found any good matches for the patterns that the bees were sewing, I would love to hear about those too. And yeah, let's see what they've got for us next week. All right, thanks so much for watching. See you later. Bye.